everybody, I'm Mitch from Rain and Pours, and I wanted to do this little video because I've just received my new jars of This Little Piggy pigment, and there's one question that we get asked very frequently in the Little Piggy group, especially with new piggy owners, and that is, why are some of the jars less full than others? So there is a very scientific explanation for this, and that is because some of the pigments are more dense than others. So This Little Piggy pigments are all sold by weight, which by law any solid packaged objects have to be sold by weight. So they are all sold in 20 gram lots. So every single jar is guaranteed to have 20 grams worth of pigment in there. Now, some pigments are denser than others, so that means that they will sink to the bottom of the jar and they'll take up less space than some of the other ones. So this is most noticeable with the interference colors and some of the bigger particle size pigments like Sapphire, Grenache and Galaxy. Now, the coloured ones like Sapphire, Grenache and Galaxy, they all tend to take up the same amount of space in the jar as the other pigments. However, the interference ones are the most noticeable with, half-filled, quarter-filled jars. Rest assured, they all weigh exactly 20 grams and some of them even weigh 21. We do that just to be sure that every single jar has the same weight in there. And I'm going to show you how to check to make sure that you're not being ripped off, you are getting the same amount of pigment. So the easiest way to do that is with a set of scales. So I'm going to show you that the pigments that I've just got, I've literally just opened the box and I haven't even taken the paper out, taken them out yet. And I've got my set of scales down here on my table, so I'm going to flip the camera down and I'll show you how we're going to check that. Okay, so I've got my box full of pigments here and I've got some little labels that I like to stick on the lids, so I will do that as I go. So I'll put them upside down so we can see what I've ordered. So I did order a couple of jars of ones that I was running low on stock on, and I've got some of all of the new release colours as well. Okay, that's my invoice. I will keep that aside for tax purposes. Okay, so Agapanthus, I was sent a jar of the last release Agapanthus, so I don't have a label for the top of this one, so I'm going to set that one aside for the moment. And let's bring these all over to one side so I can show you the scales. So I have here an empty jar from This Little Piggy Grenache. This was one I used up quite a while ago. So the way that I'm going to check this is I'm going to weigh the jar and then I'm going to tare that weight, T-A-R-E, and that means I'm going to zero out my scales to only find the weight of this jar. Then I'm going to put the pigments onto each one. So in these jars, I can see that Macaw is about half as full as Whitehaven is. And it's going to be really difficult to show you this on camera. But Brulee is about half as full as what Velvet is. And all of these are about half as full as what some of the other colours are. And like I said, that's just because they are denser pigments. So, to show you that they are all weighed exactly the same, here's my jar on the scale and I'm going to turn that on. So that's going to read 0. As soon as I take that off, I know this jar weighs 14 grams. It hovers between 13 and 14. So if we put Brulee on top, 20 grams of pigment. If we put Whitehaven on top, 21 grams of pigment. If we put Nightfall, 21 grams. We go Zeus. Alright, you get the picture here. Lakeside, Echeveria, 20 grams, Lakeside, 20 grams. Every single jar of these is going to have at least 20 or 21 grams. So, Afterglow's coming up a little bit lower. So, going to zero that out. Re-zero our jar. And just double check that. 21 grams. So having an accurate set of scales is important if you're going to do this. 21, Macaw 21, Velvet 21, okay? So you get the picture. All of the jars weigh 21 grams of pigment. So yeah, if you notice that your jars are coming less full, rest assured you're always getting 20 grams worth of pigment. And the advantage to the interference colors, even though you're physically getting, the same amount of powder, but it looks like there's less of it, they're also more intense. So for example, this one is, where's Velvet, for example. So Velvet and Macaw here, to mix these up into, your pouring medium, you're going to need a lot less of this because they are more concentrated. Because the pigment is more dense, it's actually going to spread through your pouring medium more easily, and you're actually going to be able to make the same amount of pouring medium with Hammerhead as you are with macaw or velvet. Okay, so it doesn't matter which pigments you use. I find I can make about 500 milliliters of pouring medium with a full jar of pigment. That's for Sheleeart Blooms, and I think it's actually a fair bit more mixture because I haven't gone through any single jar. I am getting low on all of these, and the only one I've really gone through was Grenache because I made a really big piece with that. But yeah, I can mix up plenty more than 500 milliliters of pouring medium with this. Now, if you are doing thinner techniques, you are going to need to add a little bit more pigment because they will stretch much further. And when you stretch those pigments out, you're going to see graininess from the individual specks of pigment. That's perfectly normal. However, if you are doing thinner techniques, it's recommended to add a little bit more pigment to it so that it is more saturated, I guess. And as that pigment spreads across the surface, you're not going to see those little individual particles. Also, using these over a white background with the darker colors or the bigger particle sized colors, for example Sapphire and Nightfall, if you use those over a dark background, you're more likely to see the particles than you are with Velvet or any of the interference colors. Some of them have really, really big particles and some of them have really fine particles. So for example, Afterglow and Show Pony I think should be fine over a white background. However, steer clear of putting these directly over a white background because you will see those particles. Black background, however, they just look really brilliant and sparkly. So I always prefer to work with black because I think that makes the pigments shine much better. Now, when you are mixing up your pigments, it's always best to disperse them in some gloss varnish first. So I do want to mix up a little bit of pigment, and I will show you how I do that really quickly. So mainly this video was to show that each jar is getting exactly 20 grams of pigment in each one. And what I will do is I'll show you how I mix these up for the Sheleeart Bloom technique. And there's a couple of crucial steps that you should follow whenever you do this. And I think I'm going to mix up Parakeet. So I've got some TLP Parakeet here, and I don't have this mixed up at the moment. So I should be wearing gloves while I do this, but sometimes I forget, so let's just grab those on now. So wetting your pigments before you mix in your pouring medium is a very important step because it allows all of that pigment to settle into the mixture, and it's going to mix into your pouring medium much easier. So my jar here must have been on its side at some point or upside down because there's stuff everywhere. I'm just going to tap that into the container, and I like to put my powder in after my varnish. So this is a mixture here of Josonia Gloss Varnish and water, and I mix that at about 3 parts varnish to 1 part water, and that's going to make up the wet part of the pouring medium. And then I'm going to add in a heaped spoonful of Parakeet. So let me zoom this in for you. So this is a Fluid Art Coaster stick. These are brilliant. They're really nice and sharp at the bottom so that you can scrape all the corners of your painting. So I'm going to put 1, and for this is a 2-ounce cup. I'm going to put 2 healthy scoops in there, and you can see it doesn't look like I've taken anything out of that container. You get plenty of pigment in there. So to disperse, all you do is give this a good stir, and you want to do this gently so you're not puffing up any clouds of pigment. This stuff is really, really fine and can get into your lungs, and because it is a mica based pigment, it can stay in your lungs forever. It won't dissolve. So make sure you are using a mask when you are working with dry pigments of any form, even if you're working with flour and you're baking, or if you're working outside with the dust. Always make sure you are wearing a mask. And once that's wet, feel free to stir a little bit more vigorously. Now that is complete, and you can see I've got an almost lump-free mixture here. So pushing your stir stick against the edge of the cup is a great way to get rid of those lumps. Normally I would use the piggy blender to really mix this up, but I don't want it to be overly frothy. Then in this container I have some Taubman's Door and Trim In Gloss Neutral, and that is a house paint. It is an untinted house paint. If you are in the USA or Canada, you would use Bear 8300. That is the best one to use. If you are looking for that, you do have to go in store, take it off the shelf, and do not get it tinted. Don't say anything to the paint counter, and if they ask you, say, yes, I know what I'm doing with it. I'm going to add color to it on my own. And if you are in the UK or Europe, I believe it is the Valspar 700 wood and metal that you need for your untinted base. Now, if you are mixing these up for any other techniques, you could use gel medium, you could use mixed pouring medium, Sax medium, just trying to think of a couple of others. Basically anything that dries clear you can use, just do not use Floetrol, because Floetrol is not a pouring medium and it won't bind your pigment together. It will make it dull. And I'm going to add to this about 2 tablespoons worth of paint. I don't measure, I go by eye, because I measure everything by consistency instead of by tablespoons and things like that. But as a rough estimate, I've got 1 tablespoon of pigment in here with 1 tablespoon of Jo Sonja gloss varnish and 2 tablespoons of pouring medium. Okay, and just giving that a really good mix. Now, because we've already dispersed our pigment into that varnish, it's much easier to get into all of those corners and get that really amazing lime green parakeet color. Okay. So there we go. That's ready to use for my pours, and that is basically the perfect consistency. I estimated how much color I needed quite well. Okay, so you can see that every jar weighs exactly 20 grams with the pigment in there. Most of them weigh 21, and we do that as a safety buffer so that we know that you are always going to get the same amount of pigment every single time. Also, when you're mixing, don't forget to disperse your pigment very well in whatever medium that you're going to use. If you're using them for resin, you can mix them straight in. They should dissolve right away. However, if you do want to disperse for that, just to be sure, use 99% isopropyl alcohol and they'll dissolve right in. You can also use your isopropyl alcohol to dissolve them for regular pouring techniques because that will evaporate out, and you should be absolutely fine to do that. Alright guys, so hopefully this video has helped you understand how your piggies are packaged up and sent to you, and that you're guaranteed to always get that same amount of pigment. I've been Mitch from Rain and Pours, and I'll see you next time. Bye.